The works of J.R.R. Tolkien are often considered some of the greatest works in literature. His novels The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings remain popular novels over half a century after their publications. Of course, with these popular novels comes film and TV adaptations, and the works of Tolkien are no exception. Today, I'm going to tell you about the different versions of these novels, the good and the bad. My name is Lainey, and this is Movie Mania. Going through movie history, my goal is to give you insight into all types of films. Today's topic is Middle-earth movies. Before we get to an actual movie adaptation of Tolkien's work, let's talk about a film that could have been. The most famous band in history could have been the first live-action adaptation of The Lord of the Rings. In the 1960s, the head of Beatles film company Dennis O'Dell wanted to make a Lord of the Rings film starring the Beatles. According to the deal, John Lennon would have played Gandalf, Frodo, or Gollum. Ringo wanted to play Sam, Paul McCartney wanted to play Frodo, and George Harrison would have been Gandalf. Musician Donovan wanted to play Mary, and they wanted famous model Twiggy to be Galadriel. Directors, including Stanley Kubrick, turned them down, so no adaptation was made. But just imagine what this could have been. I would have definitely watched this movie. The first film adaptation of The Hobbit was pretty rough. 1967's The Hobbit was made by Rembrandt Films, which initially wanted to make a live-action film with 20th Century Fox, but the deal fell through. So they made a cheap, poorly animated 12-minute version. The film follows Bilbo Baggins, Gandalf, General Thorin Oakenshield, and Princess Mika, who isn't even a Tolkien creation, as they slay the dragon and find the Arkenstone. They can't even get Gollum and Smaug's name right. The film was unknown to many until 2012, where it can be found on YouTube. Even though the film is a difficult watch for die-hard fans, still check it out. If I have to suffer through it, you do too. The next major adaptation of The Hobbit is 1977's Rankin Bass production. Yes, the same group that made the famous Rudolph cartoon. The film follows the classic tale of The Hobbit, but made a little more family-friendly. Some of the main critiques of the adaptation include the animation and changes to the story. For example, the film doesn't include the Arkenstone, which is one of the main reasons why Bilbo was asked to join the group in the first place. However, the film won a Peabody and Christopher Award, and received mostly positive reviews. If you're looking for a short adaptation of The Hobbit, this film is for you. The Lord of the Rings was first adapted to film in 1978, combining elements of the Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers. The film follows the creation of the Fellowship up to the Battle of the Helm's Deep. The film was very flawed in many ways. It leaves out many elements featured in the novels, as many adaptations do, and many critics claim that if you haven't read the books, the movie would not make any sense. The film features scenes with rotoscoping, a type of animation where scenes are filmed in live action and then drawn into animation cells. However, this kind of leaves the film looking pretty weird. Overall, this film's a strange watch, but I recommend it. The first adaptation of The Return of the King was released in 1980. The film follows the plot of the novel and is often viewed as an okay adaptation. The film is not a sequel to the 1978 Lord of the Rings film, but it's a much darker sequel to the 1977 Hobbit film, which can be pretty confusing. Director Arthur Rankin Jr. said that this isn't a good film, but I'll leave that up to you. While I've talked bad about many of these early films, they are still very important. For many kids during this time, it was their introduction to Tolkien's work. Without these flawed films, who knows when the first adaptations would have been made. They also influenced future versions of Tolkien adaptations, so it's important to recognize the impact of these films. Up next, I'm going to talk about some of the foreign versions of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and some of the most famous versions. The main reason I wanted to include this next film is the really long title. The Fabulous Journey of Mr. Bilbo Baggins, the Hobbit, across the wild land, through the dark forest, beyond the misty mountains, there and back again, is a TV play production of The Hobbit from the Soviet Union. This film excludes a lot of details from The Hobbit, and many of the wild characters are either puppets or people in a lot of makeup. If you're looking for a weird film, check this out. This next adaptation of The Lord of the Rings is a two-part special from the Soviet Union released in 1991. Guardians of the Ring was originally lost since its first broadcast, but was rediscovered in 2021. The film only covers the first book, so it leaves a bit of a cliffhanger at the end. However, the adaptation includes elements from the story that haven't been featured in other versions, including the entire Tom Bombadil plotline. So, if you want to watch it, watch it, I guess. The title of this next TV miniseries might make you believe that it's a version of The Hobbit, but it's actually a version of The Lord of the Rings. 1993's Hobbit is a Finnish miniseries that focuses on the journey of Frodo and Sam. The production is pretty faithful until the Council of Elrond, but removes the major battles. It gives a limited view of the story, but if your favorite characters are Frodo and Sam, you might like this version. The most famous adaptation of Tolkien's work is the film trilogy by Peter Jackson. The Lord of the Rings are often considered some of the greatest and highest grossing films of all time. The live action films popularized Tolkien's work for modern audiences. The portrayal of main characters have become synonymous with the actors who portrayed them in the film, including Elijah Wood as Frodo, Sir Ian McKellen as Gandalf, and Andy Serkis as Gollum. All of the films have a 91 or higher percent on Rotten Tomatoes. On IMDb's Top 200 Movies, Return of the King ranks number 7, The Fellowship of the Ring ranks number 9, and The Two Towers ranks number 12. Return of the King is number 17 on the Top 200 Narrative Films features on Letterboxd. The series won 17 Oscars, with Return of the King winning all 11 Oscars it was nominated for. This is often considered the definitive version of The Lord of the Rings, and is one to watch. With the success of Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, he decided to adapt The Hobbit into a trilogy. The films were a great success, but were not often as critically acclaimed as The Lord of the Rings. One of the major issues people had with the films is that it stretched one book into three-hour movies. However, the films did a good job on expanding the story. If you want a long, while still good version of The Hobbit, check this series out. An animated prequel to The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings is set to release on December 13th, 2024. Based on a story in the appendices of The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim follows the Rohan king Helm Hammerhand as he defends his kingdom. The actress that plays Eowyn in the live-action Lord of the Rings will narrate the film. Only time will tell how this film fares. Well, that concludes this episode of Movie Mania. I hope you enjoyed this series. If you did, like and subscribe. If you have any questions or ideas for future topics, comment down below. Thanks for listening.